In this video, we're going to finish up learning about the Borda count method, and then we're going to look at a summary example and then the Borda count method flaws. So let's start here with another example of where we are using the Borda count method to find the winner of an election. We're going to look at the Wildcat softball example. And so remember that we start by awarding points for each ranking. So fifth place, last place, gets 1 point. Fourth place gets 2 points, third place gets 3 points, second place gets 4 points, and first place gets 5 points for each vote. And then we're going to take each candidate one at a time, determine how many first place votes they received, multiply that by 5, then find how many second place votes they received, multiply that by 4, third place votes multiplied by 3, fourth place votes multiplied by 2, and then last place votes multiplied by 1. We're going to add all of those together, and that's going to give us our total Borda count points for each candidate. So what I recommend at this point is to pause the video and you to try to calculate the Borda points for each candidate. Once you have those calculated, then go ahead, restart the video, and you can see if you have the correct answer. So now that you have taken some time to do the calculations yourself, you should have ended up with Alice with 84 points, Beth 85, Kara 79, Dawn 87, and Eileen 85. If you did not, you may want to go back and see if you can figure out why you messed up or where you messed up, and feel free to reach out to me if you need to get some clarification on where you went wrong. We're going to move on and look at the second point here, or second question, which is the maximum number of points any one candidate could have received. Well, remember that a first place vote is worth 5 points, and there are 8 plus 6, so 14, 19, 23, 26, 28 voters. So to find the minimum number of points would be all last place votes. So that would be 28 voters times 1 point per vote, or 28 points. Which candidate wins using the Borda count method? Well, that would be the one who has the highest number of points. So in this case, Dawn with 87 points. And how many total points are distributed? Well, remember, we're going to use our formula for that, our V, which represents voters, times N plus 1 divided by 2. And in this case, we end up with 420 total Borda points. Now, don't let this calculation throw you off. What all of this is, the 28 represents V, that represents the voters. 5 represents the N, the number of candidates, and 6 is N plus 1. And you'll notice that from here to here, all we did was divide 28 by 2. That's where the 14 came from. And 5 times 6 is 30, so that's where the 30 came from. And then when you multiply those together, you get 420. So in our summary example, let's start by stating the plurality candidate. So remember, plurality means the most first place votes, not necessarily a majority, but just the most. So in this case, A has 21, B 26, and C 3. So B is our plurality candidate with 26 votes. Next question, is the plurality candidate a majority candidate? Well, remember, majority means over half of the first place votes. So the first thing we have to do is determine the total number of voters. So 21 plus 26 plus 3 is 50. So if there are 50 total voters, half would be 25, and more than half would be 26. So it takes 26 votes for a majority. B did in fact receive 26 votes, so B is a majority. Is there a Condorcet candidate? Well, remember that Condorcet a candidate has to beat every other candidate in a head-to-head comparison. However, we don't have to do the comparisons here because remember, if we have a majority candidate, they've received more than half of the first place votes, and therefore they are guaranteed to beat every other candidate in a head-to-head comparison. And therefore, since B is a majority candidate, B will also be a Condorcet candidate. The Borda count winner, well, to find that, we have to start by awarding our points. So third place is going to get 1 point, second place will get 2, and first place will get 3. Then we find the number of first place votes for A and multiply that by 3, the number of second place votes for A by 2, and multiply the number of last place by 1 and add those together, so forth and so on. Again, if you would like to practice this on your own, go ahead, pause the video, take a couple of minutes to do those calculations, and then when you come back, we'll look at the winners. So now that you've had a couple minutes to look those over, the board account winner in this case is going to be C. And again, if you came up with something different, go back and look to see if you can determine where you went wrong. And if not, then please reach out to me and send me your calculations, and I can help you figure out where you're going wrong. All right, so just like with the plurality method, the board account method does have flaws. The first one being that the board account winner may not be the majority candidate. And so you can imagine that if we have a majority candidate, we would assume that they would win the election. So we're going to find out that isn't always the case with the board account. The board account winner may not be the Condorcet candidate. So again, just because they win the board account doesn't mean they're a Condorcet. And just like with plurality, the results can be manipulated by insincere voting. In other words, a voter votes for someone else because they feel like their candidate doesn't have a chance to win, so they're trying to vote for somebody they think might actually win the election, even though they're not really their preferred. So, quick summary. Fill in the blank with always implies or may not imply. Well, a majority candidate, remember that is more than 50% of the first place votes. So if you have a majority candidate, that always implies a plurality candidate. The majority candidate, again, because they have over half of the first place vote, they're going to beat everybody else head to head. So the majority candidate always implies a Condorcet candidate. The majority candidate, however, does not always imply the board account winner. So it may or may not imply that. Because if a candidate is just barely a majority and they got all last place votes from everybody else, then it is possible that there could be a better compromise candidate, even though that candidate had more than half of the first place votes. The plurality candidate may or may not imply the Condorcet candidate. The plurality candidate may or may not imply a board account winner. Board account winners may or may not be Condorcet candidates, and board account winners may or may not imply a plurality candidate. Because again, remember that board account is based on all rankings and not just that first place ranking.